Okay, so good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, classmates. Today, I will be discussing about test of hypothesis for population mean. So, let us first define hypothesis and hypothesis test. When we say hypothesis, it is a premise or claim that we want to test or investigate. Then we have the hypothesis tests, are used to make decisions or judgments about the value of a parameter, such as the population mean. There are two approaches for conducting a hypothesis test. The first one is the critical value approach, and the second one is the p-value approach. Since a sample statistic is being used to make decisions or judgments about the value of a parameter, it is possible that the decision reached is an error. So there are two types of errors made when conducting a hypothesis test: the type 1 error and the type 2 error. Okay, so basically we perform a test of hypothesis only when we are making decision about a population parameter based on the value of a sample statistics. Okay, so we have types of hypothesis. The first one is the null hypothesis. The hypothesis to be tested denoted by, so ayan po, capital letter H and a small 0. It is assumed to be true. Then we have the alternative hypothesis. A hypothesis considered to be an alternate to the null hypothesis. It is denoted by capital letter H and a small letter a. Okay, so what we believe might actually be true. Okay, so take note po that alternative hypothesis, alternate lang po siya ng ating null hypothesis. And then, pag null hypothesis po, it contains the equal sign. So, ginagamitan po siya ng equal sign. While alternative hypothesis contains an inequality. So, yan po, meron tayong less than, greater than, and not equal sign. Okay, so let's have first an example of null and alternative hypothesis. Okay, so consider as a non-statistical example of a person who has been indicted for committing a crime and is being tried in a court. Okay, so based on the available evidence, the judge or jury will make one of two possible decisions. Okay, so number one, the person is not guilty. Okay, number two, the person is guilty. So in statistics po, the person is not guilty is called the null hypothesis, and the person is guilty is called the alternative hypothesis. Because in the beginning of the trial, it is assumed that the person is not guilty. So the null hypothesis is usually the hypothesis that is assumed to be true. So ayan po, meron tayong null hypothesis, the person is not guilty, and alternative hypothesis, the person is guilty. Okay, so another example. It is believed that a candy machine makes chocolate bars that are on average 5 grams. A worker claims that the machine, after maintenance, no longer makes 5-gram bars. Okay, so state the null and alternative hypothesis. Okay, so dito po, kung paano po natin isulat ang null hypothesis, meron po tayo ditong capital letter H and the small zero. Then we have a colon, and then the mean of the population or the population mean. And then we have equal sign and then 5 gram. So yan po yung ating null hypothesis, currently true or assumed to be true. Next, meron tayong alternative hypothesis. So ayan po, meron tayong capital letter H and small letter A. Then, colon, the population mean, and then yung ginamit po natin is not equal sign. And then 5 gram. So yan po yung ating alternative hypothesis. It is proposed to be true or and to be tested. So take note po that null and alternative hypothesis are mathematically opposites. So yan po, kung ginamitan natin ng equal sign ang ating null hypothesis, automatic ang ating alternative hypothesis is gagamitan natin ng not equal sign. Okay po, next we have types of errors. So we have number 1, type 1 error, meaning rejecting the null hypothesis when in fact null hypothesis is actually true. Then next, type 2 error, accepting the null hypothesis when in fact null hypothesis is actually false. So dito po meron tayong illustration. Kaya nakalagay po dyan, decision, reject the null hypothesis and accept the null hypothesis. So dito po pala sa pag-calculate ng ating test statistics, meron tayong 2 possible outcomes para sa ating test. So ayan po, reject the null hypothesis, and yung isa po is accept the null hypothesis. Okay, so ayan, meron tayong null hypothesis is true, and then sa baba po niyan is type 1 error and correct decision. And then yung last, meron tayong null hypothesis is false, and then sa baba po niyan is correct decision and type 2 error. Okay, so the probability of making a type 1 error is called the significance level. Denoted by small letter, yung ating Greek letter po, alpha. So meron tayong 0.01, 0.05, and 0.1. The significance level is used as a basis to determine the rejection region. Okay, so since it is the probability of rejecting a true null hypothesis, or in other words, the probability the test statistic will fall in the rejection region, when in fact the null hypothesis is true. Okay, so meron tayong rejection region. It is the set of values for the test statistic that leads to the rejection of the null hypothesis. Okay, so we also have the critical values. It is the beginning and ending of the rejection region. Okay, so ayan po, kung makikita nyo po sa ating screen, meron tayong one-tailed and then meron po siyang less than na ginamit, and then another one-tailed meron greater than, and then yung last is two-tailed and meron po siyang not equal sign. So dito po sa ating one-tailed na ginamitan ng less than na sign, pwede po siyang tawagin as the left-tailed. So meron tayo ditong curve na kung makikita nyo po, yung nasa left part po is merong shaded part. So yan po yung tinatawag nating rejection region. And then, sa baba po niyan, meron tayong nakikitang negative Z, A, and negative TA. So, yan po yung tinatawag nating critical values or the critical region. Okay, sa gitna naman po, another one-tailed, pwede po natin siyang tawagin as the right-tailed. And then, dito po, unlike po sa ating left-tailed, yung shaded part po nito is nasa right part po. So, ayan po yung ating rejection region. And then, yung nasa baba po is our critical region. So, dyan po, makikita natin yung critical values. And then last, we have the two-tailed. So, dito po, kung makikita nyo, the left and the right part of our normal distribution curve, meron pong shade. So, yan po yung ating rejection region. So, dalawa po. And then, sa baba po niyan is meron tayong negative and positive. So, yan po yung ating critical region. Okay, so take note po na yung non-shaded part naman po, yan po yung tinatawag nating non-rejection region. Okay, so meron tayo ditong test statistic. So the test statistic used as a basis for deciding whether the null hypothesis should be rejected or not. So yan po yung sinasabi ko kanina na meron tayong possible outcomes. If the test statistic results in a value that is in the rejection region, we will reject the null hypothesis. If the test statistic results in a value that is not in the rejection region, we will accept the null hypothesis. So, yan po yung sabi, na kung yung ating calculated test statistics ay nag-result sa value na nasa rejection region, we will reject the null hypothesis. Okay? Otherwise, we will accept. Okay, proceed po tayo sa steps for hypothesis testing for one sample mean. Okay, so as I have said po earlier, we have two approach in conducting our hypothesis testing. So dito po meron tayong the critical value approach. Okay, so meron tayong 7 steps. So let's start. We have step 1, state the null hypothesis. So ayan po, kung makikita nyo po, meron tayong capital letter H and then 0. So yan po yung ating null hypothesis. Ganyan po yan isulat. And then we have colon and then our population mean. And then we use equal sign and our hypothesized mean. Okay, so our hypothesized mean is a specified value. So given na po yan sa ating problem. Okay, so next, step 2, state the alternative hypothesis. Okay, so dito po meron tayong tatlo. Number 1, HA. So ayan po yung ating alternative hypothesis, colon, and then our population mean. And then we use here the not equal sign and then the hypothesized mean. So yan po yung ating two-tailed test kasi not equal po yung ginamit natin. And then number 2, we have the alternative hypothesis, colon, the population mean, and then greater than the hypothesized mean. So ito po yung one-tailed test or the right-tailed test kasi greater than po yung ginamit. And then last, we have HA, colon, the population mean, less than the hypothesized mean. So ito po yung ating left-tailed test kasi less than po yung ginamit. So, yan po yung ating alternative hypothesis. Next, we have step 3. State the significance level or the alpha value. So, as I have said po a while ago, usually po ang ating significance level ay 0.05, 0.01, and or 0.10. Okay, proceed po tayo sa step 4. Determine the rejection region. Okay, so dito po, meron tayong use when the standard deviation is known and use when the standard deviation is unknown. Okay, so sa ating standard deviation is known, meron tayo dyan two-tailed. Ayan po. Reject the null hypothesis if the z or the z value is greater than za over 2 or z is less than negative za over 2. So, yan po yung ating two-tailed. And then, next we have the right-tailed. So, yan po, reject the null hypothesis if z is greater than za. And then last, our left-tailed. Reject the null hypothesis if z is less than za. So, yan po yung ating use when the standard deviation is known. Okay, sa kabila po naman, use when the standard deviation is unknown. Okay, so dito po, we will use table C using df. Df means degrees of freedom. So, meron tayong formula, df equals n minus 1. Okay, so yan po, kung makikita nyo, meron tayong reject the null hypothesis if t or the t value is greater than ta over 2 or t is less than negative ta over 2. So, yan po yung ating two-tailed. Next, reject the null hypothesis if t is greater than ta. So, yan po yung ating right-tailed. And the next, or last, reject the null hypothesis if t is less than negative ta. Okay, so yan po yung ating left-tailed. So, yan po yung step 4. Determine the rejection region. So, later po, magbibigay kami ng example. Okay, so ito po pala yung ating critical z values. Kung makikita nyo po, meron tayong alpha value. Meron tayo dyan 0.05. And then, kung makikita nyo po, meron dyan less than and greater than. And then, one-tailed and two-tailed. Okay, sa 0.05, meron dyan positive 1.645 and negative 1.645. And then, sa two-tailed naman po, merong 1.96. Sa gitna, meron tayong 0.01 and then ang one-tailed po nila is 2.326 and negative 2.326. Sa two-tailed po is 2.576. And then last, 0.10. Meron tayo dyan positive 1.282 and negative 1.282 para sa ating one-tailed. And then 1.645 naman para sa ating two-tailed. So, mamaya po meron naman kaming table na ipe-present. Okay, next, proceed to step 5. So, calculate the test statistic. So, dito po, meron tayong dalawang formula na pwedeng gamitin. So, una, use when the standard deviation is known. So, ito po yung nabanggit ko din kanina. Meron tayo dyan, ayan po, Z equals the mean, okay, minus the population mean, okay, divided by the standard deviation over the square root of n, okay, where n stands for the sample size. So, yan po yung ating unang formula. And then, the next, use when the standard deviation is unknown. Okay, so dito po, meron tayong t equals the mean minus the population mean divided by s, or the sample standard deviation over the square root of n. So, yan po yung isang formula. Okay, so yan po yung ating gagamitin na formula para sa pag-calculate ng ating test statistic. Okay, next we have step 6. Determine if the calculated test statistic is in the critical region or not. Okay, reject or accept. Next, step 7, or the last step, state conclusion clearly in words. So, take note po that if you are working with a two-tailed test, don't forget to divide the alpha value by 2 to find the correct t value. So, yan po yung ating steps for hypothesis testing for one sample mean. So, using our critical value approach. Okay, so next we have the p-value approach to hypothesis testing. Okay, p-value is the probability of observing a value of the test statistic as extreme or more extreme than that observed. So, assuming that the null hypothesis is true. Okay, so ayan po yung ating one-tailed and two-tailed. If the p-value is less than the significance level, you would reject the null hypothesis. And if the p-value is greater than the significance level, you would accept the null hypothesis. Okay, so ito po yung ating p-value approach. So, sabi ko po kanina, meron tayong dalawang approach sa pag-calculate ng ating test hypothesis test. So, meron tayong 6 steps. We have step 1. The same lang po, state the null hypothesis. Yan po. Null hypothesis, colon, the population mean equal the hypothesized mean, where the hypothesized mean is a specified value. Then next, step 2, state the alternative hypothesis. So, almost the same lang po siya sa ating critical value approach. Meron din tayong tatlo dito. Ang two-tailed test, the right-tailed, and the left-tailed test. So, ayan po. Next, step 3, state the significance level. So, the same lang po siya sa ating critical value approach. Next, step 4. So, dito, determine the p-value. So, ang kailangan po dito is makuha natin yung ating p-value. So, mamaya, meron naman pong example na ibibigay. para mas madali po itong ma-apply. Next, step 5, compare the p-value with the alpha value. Okay, so if our p-value is less than or equal the alpha value, we have to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, otherwise we have to accept the null hypothesis. And then step 6, state your conclusion in words. So almost the same lang po siya. So yan po yung ating the p-value approach. Okay, so let us have an examples of type 1 and type 2 errors. Okay, so number 1, according to Popcorn Organization, the mean consumption of popcorn annually by Americans is 54 quarts. Okay, so the marketing division of Popcorn Organization unleashes an aggressive campaign designed to get Americans to consume even more popcorn. Okay, so the hypotheses are, so yan po, meron tayong null hypothesis. Okay, so dito po yung ginamit natin is equal 54 quarts. So yan po. And then sa ating alternative hypothesis, gumamit tayo ng greater than 54 quarts. So ang sabi po kasi doon sa aming definition, ang null hypothesis is ano siya, mathematical opposites lang po ang dalawa. So dito hindi po siya mathematically opposites. So sa ibang examples po kasi ganito yung mga nasa search namin na lumalabas. Kaya po greater than 54 quarts yung ginamit. So bakit po pala greater than? Kasi according to the statement po, the marketing division of Popcorn Organization unleashes an aggressive campaign. So ayan po. Okay, so dito po, suppose that the results of sampling lead to non-rejection of the null hypothesis. Okay, so classify that conclusion as a type 1 error, a type 2 error, or a correct decision. If in fact the average popcorn consumption by Americans has increased. Okay, so yan po, ang sabi po is the results of sampling lead, okay, to non-rejection. Ibig sabihin po, nagkaroon po or doon po sa ating possible outcomes ng test, nagkaroon ng failure to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so ibig sabihin po niyan, since nagkaroon siya ng failure to reject, magkakaroon tayo dito ng type 2 error. Okay, so kung babalikan po natin yung illustration po kanina, okay, so meron po tayo dyan, decision, reject, and accept. So yun nga po yung sabi sa example, leads to non-rejection. So ibig sabihin, magkakaroon tayo ng accept. So ayan po, kung makikita nyo po, ang ating type 2 error is accepting the null hypothesis when in fact, the null hypothesis is actually false. So ayan po, kaya meron tayo dyan type 2 error. So, yan po yung ating example number 1. Okay, next example. The mean score on the SAT Math Reasoning exam is 516. A test preparation company states that the mean score of students who take its course is higher than 516. Okay, so the hypotheses are, meron tayo dyan, null hypothesis, colon, our population mean is equal to 516. So, yan po yung ating null hypothesis. Okay, next, we have the alternative hypothesis. So, ayan po, meron tayo dyan, greater than 516. So, yung ginamit po ulit natin dito is greater than. Because, according to the statement po, a test preparation company states that the mean score of students who take its course is higher than 516. So, parang merong nag-claim na the mean score of students who take its course is higher than 516. Okay, so suppose that the results of sampling lead to rejection of the null hypothesis. So, yun po yung sabi. So, nagkaroon tayo dito ng rejection ng ating null hypothesis. Okay, so classify the conclusion as a type 1 error, a type 2 error, or a correct decision. Okay, if in fact the average SAT score has increased. So, yan po yung ating sagot. Meron tayo dyan, correct decision. Okay, the next two examples po, okay, you try to read and understand so that it will become easy for us to determine whether it is a type 1 or a type 2 error. So, ayan po. Meron na din naman po yan, sagot. Okay, so ito po yung ating critical values of the t-distribution. So, meron tayo dyan, df or the degrees of freedom. So, vertically po, may makikita kayong 1 to 30 po. And then, horizontally, meron tayong 0.10, 0.05, 0.025 until 0.0005. And then, meron po yan corresponding values. So, mamaya po, magagamit po natin yan sa ating examples na ibibigay. And then, ito naman po yung ating critical z-values. Meron tayong positive and negative. So, ayan po yung ating positive z-value table. Okay, vertically, meron tayong 0.01 hanggang 3.4. And then, horizontally, yung nasa taas, meron tayong 0.00 hanggang 0.09. And then, meron din silang corresponding value. So, lahat po yan magagamit natin mamaya sa pag-identify ng ating p-value. So, ayan po yung ating negative z-value table and then positive z-value table. Okay po, so proceed po tayo sa hypothesis testing for population mean with known population standard deviation. So, we have here example. Okay, basahin ko po. Gymnasium claims that the mean ACT score attained by 2-year college students is 22. Al dente suspects this claim is too low and selects a random sample of 121 2-year college students. The mean of the sample is 23.3 and the population standard deviation is assumed to be 3.3. Test at the 5% significance level. Okay, show all steps. Okay, so yan po yung ating problem. Okay, so ito po yung ating sagot. So, ayan po. So, yung gagamitin po natin dito is yung critical value approach. So, dito po pala, para po hindi tayo mahirapan, kindly list down na po muna yung ating mga given parameters. So, ayan po sila. Meron tayong population mean, which is 22. Meron tayong standard deviation or the population standard deviation, which is 3.3. Meron tayong mean, which is 23.3. Meron tayong sample size or N, which is 121. And then, yung ating significance level or alpha value. So, yan po ay 0.05. Why? Because sabi po doon at the 5% significance level. So, since naka-percent po siya, i-convert lang po natin siya sa decimal. So, we just move 2 places, okay, to the left. Kaya meron tayong 0.05. Okay, so next, proceed po tayo sa critical value approach. Okay, so step 1 po natin, state the null hypothesis. So ayan na po siya. Kung makikita nyo po, meron tayong age 0, okay, population mean equals 22. Okay, so next, step 2 natin, state the alternative hypothesis. So, we use greater than. So, ayan po, HA population mean is greater than 22. So, why? Because according po sa statement, al dente suspects this claim is too low and selects a random sample of 121 two-year college students. Okay, so yan po yung ating alternative hypothesis. Next, step 3, state the significance level. So, ayan po, meron po tayong alpha value which is 0.05. So, given naman po yan. Then, step 4, determine the rejection region. So, dito po, ayan po, meron na po tayong sagot. We have reject the null hypothesis if Z is greater than 1.645. Kasi po, dun po sa steps natin, nakalagay doon na kung right-tailed yung gagamitin natin, we have to reject the null hypothesis if Z is greater than ZA. So, ayan po. Next, we have now step 5. So, ito po yung importante dito. Calculate the test statistics. So, dito po, yung gagamitin po natin is the C distribution. Bakit po? Okay, so, di ba po, as I have said po a while ago, that if the sample size is greater than 30, we will use the normal distribution. So, ayan po yung formula na gagamitin natin. So, there we have Z equals the mean minus the population mean over the standard deviation or the population standard deviation divided by the square root of n. So, isa-substitute lang po natin. We have the mean, which is 23.3 minus the population mean, 22 over, okay, so our population standard deviation is 3.3, okay, divided by the square root of 121. So using mathematical operation po, compute lang po natin. So 23.3 minus 22 is equal to 1.3, and then 3.3 divided by the square root of 121 is equal to 0.3. Okay, so next, 1.3 divided by 0.3 is equal to 4.33333, or approximately 4.33. So yan na po yung final answer natin. So hindi na po namin na ilagay yung computation. Okay, so yan po yung ating Z value, which is 4.33. Okay, next, step 6. Determine if the calculated test statistic is in the critical region or not. Okay, reject or accept. So yan po pala yung ating calculated test statistic, yung 4.33. Okay, so ayan nga po, may value na tayo ng Z. So we have here reject the null hypothesis because 4.33 is greater than 1.645. So ayan po, sinubstitute lang natin yung Z. So kitang-kita naman po na ang 4.33 is greater than sa 1.645. So that we have to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so step 7. State conclusion clearly in words. Okay, so at a significance level of 0.05, the population mean is greater than 22. Okay, so yan po yung ating 7 steps using our critical value approach. Okay, so ito po pala yung ating curve. Okay, normal distribution curve. Meron po tayong 0.95. So yan po yung ating confidence level. And then meron po tayong makikita dyan na naka-shade sa ating right part po, right side, which is yan po yung ating alpha value for the rejection region. Meron tayong 0.05, and then sa baba po is yung ating critical value. Meron tayong 1.645. Okay, so yan po yung ating number 1. Okay, next, example number 2. A factory manufactures cars with a warranty of 5 years on the engine and transmission. An engineer believed that the engine or transmission will malfunction in less than 5 years. Okay, so he tests a sample of 40 cars and find the average time to be 4.8 years with a standard deviation of 0.50. Okay, letter A, state the null and alternative hypothesis. Letter B, at a 2% significance level, is there enough evidence to support the idea that the warranty should be revised? Okay, so dito po, ang gagamitin po natin is our p-value approach. Okay, so yan po. So sabi ko nga po, i-list down mo po muna natin yung ating mga parameters para mas madali na po siyang ma-apply. So we have the population mean 5. We have the mean, which is 4.8. We also have S, or the sample standard deviation, which is 0.50. We have the sample size, which is 40, and our alpha value, or the significance level, of 0.02. So ayan po siya. Okay, so proceed po tayo sa ating p-value approach. Meron po tayong 6 steps po dyan. Okay, so step 1, state the null hypothesis. So ayan po, we have H0 colon, and then the population mean greater than or equal to 5. Next, we have step 2, the state the alternative hypothesis. So ayan po, meron tayong HA colon, the population mean is less than 5. Next, step 3, state the significance level. So ayan po, given na po siya. Meron tayong 0.02. Then dito po, step 4, determine the p-value. So ayan po, mayroon na po tayong sagot dyan, which is p-value is equal to 0.0057. Then step 5, we have to compare the p-value with the alpha value. Okay, so yan na po, if the p-value is less than or equal sa alpha value, we have to reject the null hypothesis. Otherwise, accept the null hypothesis. So if our p-value is equal to 0.0057, so ayan po, kung makikita po natin, 0.0057 is less than 0.02. So ang gagawin po natin is reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so step 6, state conclusion in words. So ayan po, we have at a significance level equal 0.05. We cannot accept the null hypothesis. So ayan nga po, kasi nga po ni-reject natin. Okay, so dito po, kung makikita nyo po, andyan po yung ating solution. So dito po, we use the normal distribution. Why? Because our sample size, or n, is greater than 30. So ayan po, z is equal to the mean minus the population mean over s divided by the square root of n. So substitute lang po natin, 4.8 minus 5 over 0.50 divided by the square root of 40. And then compute 4.8 minus 5 is equal to negative 0.2. And then 0.50 divided by the square root of 40 is equal to 0.07906. And then negative 0.2 divided by 0.07906 is equal to negative 2.53. So yan po yung ating final answer. And then kung makikita nyo po, meron po tayo ulit normal distribution curve. Since less than yung ginamit natin sa ating alternative hypothesis, automatically yung shaded region po natin, or yung rejection region, is nasa left side po. So ayan po, kung makikita nyo po. And then Sa baba po niya is merong negative 2.53. So, ayan po yung ating critical Z value. So, since less than yung or left tail yung ginamit natin, automatic, negative po yung ilalagay natin dyan. Okay, so para makuha po natin yung ating p-value, so syempre kasi may magtatanong saan nanggaling yung ating p-value. So ayan nga po, meron tayong nakalagay na z to area to the left. So ayan po. So substitute lang natin yung z, which is negative 2.53 to 0.0057. So yan nga po yung question. Saan galing yung 0.0057? So kung babalikan po natin yung table kanina, which is ito, yung ating z value table, titignan lang po natin yung negative 2.53. So hanapin lang po natin vertically negative 2.5. So ayan po, negative 2.5. And then sa taas naman po, hanapin natin is 0.03. Okay? 0.03. And then, i-connect lang po natin yung dalawa. Yung negative 2.5 and 0.03. So, ang makukuha po natin dyan is 0.0057. Okay? Kung makikita nyo po, nandyan lang po. Hanapin nyo na lang po or tignan. So, okay. Meron po tayo dyan 0.0057. Okay. So, next. Okay, so balik po tayo kanina. So, ayan nga po, meron na tayong 0.0057, which is our p value. Okay, so therefore p value is less than alpha value. Okay, so that we have to reject our null hypothesis. Okay, so yan po yung ating pagkuha ng ating p-value. Okay, proceed po tayo sa hypothesis testing for population mean with unknown population standard deviation. Okay, basahin ko po. The Secretary of an Association of Professional Landscape Gardeners claim that the average cost of services to customers is $90 per month. Feeling that this figure is too high, we question a random sample of 14 customers. Okay, so our sample yields a mean cost of $85 and a standard deviation of $10. Test at the 0.10 significance level. Assume that such costs are normally distributed. Okay, so dito po yung gagamitin po natin is yung critical value approach. So ayan po, i-list down po muna natin yung ating mga parameters. Meron tayong population mean, which is 90. Meron tayong S or the sample standard deviation, which is 10. Meron tayong mean, which is 85. Meron tayong N or the sample size, which is 14. And then our alpha value or the significance level of 0.10. Okay, so proceed po tayo sa step 1. State the null hypothesis. So Ayan po, meron po tayong 90. So, H0 colon, our population mean is equal to 90. And then, step 2, state the alternative hypothesis. We have capital letter H, small letter A, and then colon. Then, we have the population mean is less than 90. So, less than po yung ginamit natin, kaya ibig sabihin yan, left-tailed test. Next, step 3, state the significance level. So, given na po yan, meron tayong 0.10. Next, determine the rejection region. So, dito po, kung makikita nyo, meron tayong DF equals 13. Okay? Where DF po stands for degrees of freedom. And then, reject the null hypothesis if T is less than negative 1.350. So, dito po, yung ginamit natin is T distribution. Bakit po? Kasi po, our sample size is less than 30, which is 14 lang po. Okay, next, step 5 po natin is calculate the test statistic. So, yun nga po, yung gagamitin po natin dito is yung ating T distribution. So, we have the formula. So, ayan po, T is equal to the mean minus the population mean over S, or the sample standard deviation, divided by the square root of N. So, dito po is, substitute lang po natin. We have 85 minus 90 over 10 divided by the square root of 14. Okay, using mathematical operation po, ang makukuha po nating sagot is negative 1.87. So, yan po yung ating calculated test statistic. Okay, step 6, proceed po tayo. We have here reject the null hypothesis because negative 1.87 is less than negative 1.350. So, sinubstitute lang po natin yung ating T value. Okay, so next, step 7, state conclusion clearly in words. Okay, so we have here at a significance level equals 0.10, the population mean is less than $90. Okay, so ayan po yung ating critical value approach. Okay, so meron po tayo ditong normal distribution curve. So, ayan po, kung makikita nyo po, meron tayong 0.99. Yan po yung ating confidence level. And then, yung nasa left side po na may shaded part is yan po yung 0.10. Ayan po yung ating significance level. And then, sa baba po is negative 1.350. So, yan po yung ating calculated test statistic. And then, take note po that to get the value of degrees of freedom, we have the formula df equals n minus 1. So, kung yung n po natin or yung sample size is 14, magkakaroon po tayo ng sagot na 13. Kasi 14 minus 1 is equal to 13. So, yan po. And then, paano po nakuha yung negative 1.350? Punta lang po tayo sa ating table. Okay, wait lang po. Okay, so ito po yung ating critical values of the t-distribution. So, ang ating degrees of freedom is 13. So, ayan po. And then, yung nasa taas po, yun po yung ating alpha value. So, tignan lang po natin yung 0.10. And then, i-connect lang po natin yung dalawa. Kaya may makukuha po tayong 1.350. Okay, since left tail naman po yung ginamit natin, kaya naging negative po yung ating 1.350. Okay, proceed po tayo sa ating final and last example. The average weight of all residents in town XYZ is 168 pounds. A nutritionist believes the true mean to be different. She measured the weight of 36 individuals and found the mean to be 169.5 pounds with a standard deviation of 3.9. Okay, so letter A, state the null and alternative hypothesis. And then letter B, at 95% confidence level, is there enough evidence to discard the null hypothesis? Okay, use the p-value approach method. Okay. So, dito po, ang gagamitin po natin is the p-value approach. So, ayan po, list down po muna natin yung ating mga parameters. Meron tayong mean, which is 168 for the population mean. And then, meron tayong, ito po yung mean, which is 169.5. And then, we have the standard deviation, which is 3.9. We have the sample size, which is 36. And then, so dito po, confidence level is 95%. Okay. So, hindi po given yung ating alpha value. Okay, so to find po the significance level or the alpha value, first, we have to convert first 95% to decimal. So, magiging po siyang 0.95. And then, to find the alpha value, we have the formula alpha equals 1 minus c. Okay? So, we have 1 minus 0.95 is equal to 0.05. So, yan po yung ating significance level. Okay? Since kompleto naman po, proceed na po tayo sa ating p-value approach. Okay, so step 1, state the null hypothesis. So, ayan po, meron tayong H0 colon and then the population mean is equal to 168. Next, state the alternative hypothesis. We have here, okay, we use the not equal sign. So, ibig sabihin po, we will use the two-tailed test dito. So, yan po yung ating alternative hypothesis. Then next, we have, okay, state the significance level. So, ayan na po, given na po siya, 0.05. Okay, so step 4, determine the p-value. Okay, so dito po ang ating p-value is 0.02088. So mamaya po ipapakita po natin kung paano po yan nakuha. Okay, next, step 5, compare the p-value with the alpha value. Okay, so dito po 0.02 is less than 0.05. So ibig sabihin po, we have to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, next, step 6, state your conclusion. So at a significance level equals 0.05, we cannot accept the null hypothesis. Okay, so kung makikita nyo po, nandyan po yung ating solution. So dito po, gumamit po tayo ng z or the normal distribution. So we just substitute lang po yung ating mga given. So we have the mean 169.5 minus the population mean, which is 168, okay, over the standard deviation, which is 3.9, divided by our sample size, which divided by the square root of 36. And then using our mathematical computation, we will get 2.31. Okay, so yan po yung ating calculated test statistic using our z normal distribution. Okay po, para po naman makuha natin yung ating p-value, okay, take note that p-value is the total area of the shaded region. Okay, so meron po ulit tayong normal distribution curve. Since two-tailed po yung ginamit natin, the left and the right side po ay merong shaded. Okay, so kung makikita nyo po, meron tayong 0.97912. Yan po yung ating non-rejection region or the non-shaded part. And then, yun pong atin naman na merong shaded part is 0.01044. And then, sa baba po nila is negative 2.31 sa left and positive 2.31 sa right. Okay, so kunin po natin yung ating p-value. So there we have z. So yun po yung ating calculated test statistic 2.31. So dito po is punta lang po tayo sa ating z table. Okay, so ito po. So kung makikita nyo po sa ating z table, hanapin lang po natin yung 2.3. Okay, and then sa taas po yung 0.01. Okay, so after po natin makita, connect lang po natin yung dalawa. So may makukuha po tayong 0.9896. Okay, so dito po sa aming PowerPoint nakalagay po is 0.98956. Okay, okay, so meron po tayong 0.98956. Okay, so para po makuha natin yung area of the shaded region, we will just subtract 0.98956 from 1. and then we will get 0.01044. So ayan po yung nakalagay dito sa ating normal distribution curve. Okay, so next, para naman po makuha natin yung area of the non-shaded region, we will just subtract 0.01044 from 0.98956. So that we will get 0.97912. So ayan na po yung nakalagay sa ating curve. Okay po, since nandyan naman po lahat or given na po lahat, kunin po natin yung ating p-value. Since p-value is the total area of the shaded region, i-multiply lang po natin yung 0.01044 sa 2. So ayan po, may makukuha po tayong 0.02088. So yan po yung ating p-value. So ayan po yung nakalagay sa ating step 4, which is determine the p-value. Okay, so after po nyan, i-compare na lang po natin. So nakalagay naman po sa ating step 5, p-value is less than the alpha value or the significance level. So that we have to reject our null hypothesis. Okay, so yan po yung ating final and last example. Okay, so that ends our discussion po. I thank you for listening. I hope you understand well. If you have questions, you can just ask me and my partner Julito Pines Jr. Okay, so thank you everyone and God bless.